On today's episode of the Holistic Savage podcast.
This is something that men need to start doing, and men need to start challenging themselves. Find these authentic connections. That's the other piece too, is find good freaking people out there. And in the world of men, most men suck.
All right, functional friends, welcome back to the Holistic Savage podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing one of my newer functional friends, somebody that I kind of randomly met in Arizona. I'm sure I'll tell the story, but Doc Jacque, what is up, brother? How are you doing today?
Doing pretty great, man. Just happy to be back in the States after traveling to Spain, and happy to do this podcast with you, brother.
Hell yeah, brother. What's going on in Spain? Was that a personal vacation, or what's the scoop on that?
It was personal abuse. No, it was, do you know who Ben Pakulski is? BPAC?
Do I know Ben Pakulski? Hell yeah, man.
So he does this organization called Muscle Intelligence. So he had this huge event out in Spain. He had one in Costa Rica, December of last year. They call them muscle camps. So we were doing 3-day workouts. We were trying to work with the finding the balance between the warrior and the monk. So being able to kind of turn it on and just boom, get after it, and then boom, being able to turn it off and go into more of like a meditative state, a yogic state, or just just calm state, so we can show up better as men and leaders in our community. So got back on Monday at midnight for that. My wife's joking at me because I keep talking about jet lag. I used to think it was a myth. And then when you experience it, you know it's not. So working my way through it.
Right on, man. Yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. I can feel it already. You know, Ben Pakulski, he's one of those dudes that, like, back in my early 20s, I had my super intense bodybuilding phase where there for a while, I kid you not, I'm the type of guy, like, I don't do anything half-ass. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it like full ass, you know? And so there for a while, I was literally set on, like, I'm going to be an IFBB pro. I'm going to, be, an Olympian. And then I realized, like, oh, you have to put like life-threatening amounts of steroids into your body and you're going to die by the age of like 45 from heart failure. So I'm like, maybe not. But Ben Pakulski, he was one of those dudes that I really admired for, he achieved, the kind of the highest levels of that sport. And he was always just very scientific and intelligent with his approach. That sounds like the type of event, I'd be into. And one of the things I'm sure we'll probably get into today, when I was thinking about, like, what do I want to talk to Jacque about? Kind of the traditional masculinity was something I wanted to hit. So I'll be interested to explore that, because even with what you just said, the warrior and the monk, I mean, I've seen like Paul Chek do videos of like, okay, I do this, dynamic exercise, and then he's like literally painting in between sets, because he's like, well, let's get you back to parasympathetic, between sets. But I think that's super badass. Did you have some cool takeaways from it?
Yeah, a lot, man. We incorporated this time some extra conditioning, a lot of competitive stuff, and I'm not used to doing, like, after football, like I kind of hung up like the high intensity stuff and a lot of like the cardio, and I'm a natural ectomorph, so when I do it, I tend to lose weight. So I did the rower for like I've screwed around on a rower before, but not at this level of capacity, and we ended up cheating to win, and I didn't know it because I ended up like blacking out on the rower because I just like went into like this breath state, and I just got myself and just basically passed out. I even got emotional afterwards. Like I elicited that emotion. I'm like, holy crap. And then from that, with the what I turned into, like the animalistic piece of me, I used to have problems with that. So talking about like the traditional masculinity, and I hid it since 2009. So for many, many years. And to see myself tap back into it again, like Ben did a great job, and he was like, are you upset? Because I was like, it made me nervous that was going to be expressed. He goes, would you be nervous to express that anger and that rage if somebody was coming to take your wife and kids? I was like, oh, no, absolutely not. And he goes, and it's just controlling it, and it's pointing and controlling that rage, but knowing that you have it and you can turn it on at any minute if you need it. So that was one of my big take homes as well, is like harnessing those emotions for good instead of for bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like that. It makes me think of something I've heard, Jordan Peterson say of, I think it's like, an innocent man is not a good man, right? Like a good man is an absolute monster, who has it under control. And, for me, as I've come into manhood and adulthood, and I'm always evolving, and of course, in this crazy world we live in, and there's all this talk of toxic masculinity, something I've kind of been exploring with some of my guy guests. other strong men, other strong men of integrity. Uh, I like exploring that. Like, what does it mean to be a good, strong, integral man in today's world? And I think, to your point, that's a big piece of it. It kind of makes me think of like the sheepdog culture. You know what I mean? Like, there's some of us, not all of us, but some of us that, we live that, we embody that. And to your point, it's like, okay, maybe the world has gotten like a little bit softer and cushy and technological, but I still think we need, the strong, integral sheepdog men.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that, and I think like a lot of men, I think battle with that, and I think from a mental health standpoint, with depression and anxiety, like if you're not able to tap into that animalistic or that primal within you, it can feel like you're kind of dying on the
Mm.
inside, and if the world's telling you suppress, 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 then you're like, well, I don't know what else to do. So you continue to live that life. And you're like, I don't know why I'm anxious. I don't know why I'm depressed. I don't know why I can't sleep at night. And then it's like, I don't know why I have low testosterone. It's like, well, you're not using testosterone. You're sitting on your butt all day long. You're not working out. You're eating shit food all the time. So why would your body even think about producing testosterone anyways? Because you're not going to use it, even if it did. But I do agree 1,000%. We are way too soft and we're conditioned to run away from pain instead of grow with the pain. And when we have Amazon Prime that can get us something immediately, or we can immediately hit the eject button on anything in life now, it makes us softer because we don't overcome any adversity. So we just keep thinking less and less and less of ourselves. So when stress happens, whether it's in business or in relationships or in life, we're weaker. And we kind of like shy away from it because we don't think that we're capable of overcoming difficult things. And it makes us more, to me, more of a coward. And then you can't show up as a great husband. You can't show up as a great father or as a great friend because you're too weak for yourself. How are you going to help anybody else?
The plot thickens, it's getting profound quick. Yeah, this is exciting because I have been looking at this obviously with my whole career and platform is very functional medicine for mental health, and then of course there's a lot to unpack there, and then it's like, well, women's health, which the majority of my students, the majority of my clients, the majority of it's a lot of women in the functional medicine space, like telling the fun story of how we met for the audience. Like, it was just what, like a year and a half ago, I think. And, my girlfriend and I were in Arizona for just Christmas and spending the holidays with her family. And of course, being the gym bro that I am, closest gym, where's the closest Lifetime Fitness? Peoria. So then it's like I'm just, getting some workout in and see this other studly dude with perfect hair. And he's like, well, what's this holistic savage thing? And I'm like, well, there's not a ton of dudes in the functional medicine space. And most of the dudes, most of the men, especially on the more MD side of the functional medicine space, like a lot of older white men, not that I'm picking on anybody, but not a lot of fitness, not a lot of what we're talking about, that animalistic, it's a different thing. And I think something that I've been aware of, and I don't know that I have a perfect solution, but I think conversations like this, in many ways can be therapeutic because we look at, choosing my words carefully, let's say maybe a gender identity evolution going, across America. I think a lot of people are kind of trying to figure out what their identity really is. And especially if we're talking about epidemiology for a second, take politics out of it, the largest and fastest growing demographic of consumers of psychiatric drugs and anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants is younger men, teenage men, 20s, 30s. And of course, we could have a whole conversation around testosterone levels are plummeted. But what you just said, I think, is really powerful because, yes, is there like an environmental toxicity component, a sedentary lifestyle component? But it's deeper than that, right? And I like the way you put that on more of a philosophical level of like, why would your gonads bother churning out any testosterone when you're not giving your psyche or body the input signals to create that testosterone, which almost from what I just heard, almost kind of sounds like it would be a lack of masculine core values and purpose. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I agree with that. So if I always, since having kids, like I always think of like, how can I set the best example for my kids?
Mm-hmm.
And then I get around dads, and when I became a dad bod became a word. And I'm like, no, that's called lazy dad. Like, like there's no excuse for that. Like, set the example. So we're having these kids who are being raised by softer parents, and they don't have an example of how to be masculine. And so when a boy has all of this energy and it doesn't know what to do with it, they're quick to be labeled with ADD or ADHD and put them on a medication. When in fact, it's like, why aren't the parents taking them to go get exercise, go do some sports, go run off some of that energy and see what you're physically capable of? So I think there's a trickle down effect that's happening from like some is like by proxy this lack of masculinity, but then also there is the societal pressure to kind of tune that down a little bit. But if we're not setting that good example, then for generations to come, masculinity is always going to be seen as toxic because there's going to be men that are louder, bigger, stronger, and that intimidates a lot of people. And so that intimidation factor, to me, it's like, well, I want to be better than you. I want to be stronger than you. I would like, it motivates me because that's how I was raised. If like, hey, training with Ben Pekulski, like, dude, the guy has quads that are like, they're not even regulation size. Like, I don't know how he does it. I'm like, I want to challenge you. Or when I'm on the rower, I'm like, you pulled X amount of meters, I'm going to try to do that, or that wattage, I'm going to try to beat it. Right. And so we don't know what we're capable of until we put it to the test. And if it doesn't sit easy in our stomach and we're like, well, I guess I can't do it. It's like, no, how can I get better? And the more you do it and the more you fail, the better you get, the better you get, the better you get. And then you look back a year from now or a year and a half from when I met you, right? And we could be two totally different people and all for the better if we choose that. So there's a little bit of a kind of a dynamic between that, but that's how I kind of feel about that piece.
This episode is brought to you by DHA Laboratory. Whether you are a self-healer trying to get to the root of your chronic health complaints, or a functional practitioner looking to provide your clients or patients with the best lab testing available, DHA is your one-stop shop for all your lab testing needs. DHA offers self-healers the ability to order a wide range of lab testing to empower their self-healing journey with actionable data, while providing practitioners a consolidated lab test ordering experience to cut down on the hassle of ordering many tests from many separate labs. DHA Laboratory is also a pioneer in advancing the research of cryptopyral disorder, a commonly overlooked root cause factor in a myriad of mental health disorders. DHA is also the exclusive provider of the Mental Map, which is a cutting-edge lab panel that I personally designed to help self-healers and practitioners get to the root causes of their mental health struggles using the most clinically significant and relevant biomarkers available. Be sure to use the link in my show notes to learn more about DHA Laboratory to up-level your self-healing journey or functional practice today. This episode is brought to you by Genova Diagnostics. Genova Diagnostics is a leader in functional lab testing to help functional practitioners and self-healers get to the root causes of their chronic health complaints. Genova offers a comprehensive menu of lab testing, and some of my favorites include the GI-FX stool test that combines multiple technologies to thoroughly assess GI function and microbiome health, the metabolomics that assesses for many physiological and biochemical systems related to nutrient status, methylation function, detoxification and toxic exposure, microbiome health and dysbiosis, and much more. I also love their methylation panel, which thoroughly assesses methylation-related SNPs and methylation biomarkers reflective of current methylation status. I think it's very important if we're trying to test MTHFR and methylation health. We can't just look at the SNPs by themselves. We also have to measure these clinical biomarkers. So this is one of my favorite panels to effectively assess for methylation. I've been using these Genova diagnostic tests in my practice with great success for years, and I'm very excited to be able to offer my audience direct access to these valuable self-healing tools. So you can actually visit the Genova Diagnostics link in the show notes and use code Holistic Savage. That's all caps, no spaces, Holistic Savage, to get you a discount and get direct access to these practitioner panels. I think there's so much here, so much here. Like this could be a book, and maybe that'll happen someday. Because it's like, there's the purpose aspect of it. I like what you just said of, if we don't have strong masculine energy and role models and figures, and it kind of begs the question of like, okay, if society and the collective is kind of getting demasculinized, softer and softer, suppressing primordial, conquer the terrain, right? Something I think about a lot. I like referring to Jordan Peterson again with the one chapter of his one book that I read, because it was like, oh my God. But I remember in his like 12 rules of life or something, he's talking about like lobsters and the sociological hierarchy of lobsters. And it was actually extremely, I mean, it was kind of hard to get through, but it was really fascinating, the point that he's arguing. But the point I'm getting at is I always like to look at things from, through this lens of like evolutionary biology. We evolved a certain way for a reason. And the products that we are today are a reflection of what worked from a Darwinistic evolutionary model. And males, biological males, we are very much wired, intrinsically wired to sort of conquer terrain, hoard resources, mate with the best partner or partners, right? We're wired that way. So to kind of suppress that from a psychological, sociological, energetic, and then very real physiological perspective, now we have this low testosterone, estrogen dominance in men and women across the populace. And something I don't want to play with fire too much with gender politics, but with all the gender politics stuff going on in today's world, I remember, let me phrase it this way, actually. When I was going through Precision Nutrition Level 2, great nutrition coaching program, it was their very first class. Within that curriculum, they had a unit that was specifically talking about how do you health coach, nutrition coach a client that is going through, let's say, gender change procedures, medical treatment, getting hormone treatment or whatever's going on there. And it was actually way ahead of its time. This was back in like 2015, 16, before some of this really went off, but they were ahead of the curve in teaching like, well, because they're going through these medical procedures to change their hormone composition, that's going to change how you have to coach them from a nutritional health coaching perspective. And it was very, very well done. But ultimately, I think there's conversation to be had there with some of the gender politics of, but are we sociologically suppressing masculinity too much, and looking at all of the ways that we're physiologically inhibiting and suppressing testosterone? How does that play out sociologically over time?
Right. And I think we're going to see that, unfortunately. And I can say I feel, right. So my opinion on the issue is still going back to kids not being challenged enough. And when things get tough, they tend, oh man, I got to choose my words lightly. They can have the option to choose an easier route. And the reason that I'm saying that is from one patient in particular I had an experience with. This was back probably 2017, I believe. And so this patient came to me, and their parent was like, hey, this is so-and-so. She's identifying as a boy now. She cut her hair. She has her own name and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you're like 16 years old or 17 years old. Like, what's going on? So the mom kept talking for her, kept talking for her, kept talking for her. And I asked the mom to leave the room for a second. I was like, what's going on? And she looked at me in the eyes and was like, it's just easier. this way. I'm like, what do you mean? She was like, when I was a girl, I got bullied. I didn't fit in. I didn't do what the other kids like. I love being an artist, and my mom doesn't think my artwork is good enough. So there's all of this extra pressure that she was dealing with. And she was like, when I chose to identify as a boy, the bullying stops because you're not allowed to bully somebody that's transitioning. So the schools help those kids a little bit more than a kid that's just being regularly bullied. Now, I can't say this is 100% the case for everybody out there, but the one that I had an option to work with, I started filling her cup. Like, brought the mom back in, started talking positive to her. She showed me some of her artwork. It was like professional level. She's unbelievably talented. And within 2 weeks, we did some gut stuff, did a tiny bit of hormone stuff. She's like, no, I'm identifying as a girl again. I'm back to normal. I'm growing my hair out. Thank you. You do what I needed to do. I'm like, okay. So I think that there's an issue with, again, children being raised and having this option to just be like, well, I could just do that. Or like, I don't know. It's confusing at times. I think it's probably the easiest way to say it. It's very confusing. It doesn't make sense. And from a hormonal standpoint, I worry about the rate of cancer that these young kids are going to have. Right? Because if it's not your primary sex hormones and I'm dumping testosterone into a girl, or I'm throwing estrogen into a boy and I'm trying to suppress testosterone, we know testosterone protects the heart. And as a boy, you're supposed to have certain levels in order to protect things, as well as, I don't know if you've seen this, but in some of the literature, below 400 is associated with depression and anxiety. So then it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Are we suppressing kids down below 400 and then they're becoming anxious and they're transitioning? Or is this an issue that we're going to have to deal with in the future? So I don't think that we know the long-term ramifications of this at all. I think we just need to fucking start talking to our kids and start talking to just people, have normal conversations. Like you said, pull politics out of it and just see what makes people tick. And I think if we came together as a tribe and as a community and we stopped putting these in front of everybody's faces, right, and it shuts down that communication, I think we can have more interaction. I think we'd be in a much happier place as a human.
Gosh, man, I'm loving this conversation because even it gets weird. It gets really weird and blurry. It's hard to know because all of us have a self-interested programmed algorithm feeding us really just, I mean, the way the algorithm of, it's not even just one platform, it's all of them. They're all AI algorithm driven at this point in SEO. So it becomes a very echo chamber type environment, and not necessarily positive or negative, because I mean, the algorithm is simply designed to feed your nervous system stuff that stimulates you and keeps you plugged in. That could be, then you start thinking like, well, what stimulates your nervous system a lot? Of what sells, right? Fear sells a lot. Fear will hook you in. Fear, fear, fear. Sex, right? Primordial needs and everything, drawing you in. Or things of like confirmation bias of, yes, that is what I want to hear to affirm my subjective and biased perspective of my reality, right? And then when everybody's doing that and everybody's, being programmed by their own, algorithm reflections, it makes it really weird to know where's everybody at anymore? How are we collectively, feeling about some of these things? And to your point, in this world where it's like the idea sociologically is like you can be whatever you want. You can identify as whatever you want. You can be called, and I have no problem with any of it before I get like stabbed by my own audience or something. Whatever, like, live and let live. You do you. But in a world where you can be anything, identify as anything, and we have, the medical technology to help kind of make you into whatever you want to be, it makes it more confusing of then who should I be? What do I want to be? Because now there's more. I had to just be me because that was the only option. But now that I can be anything, what do I want to be? That's almost like too many options. It's kind of like, this with, as a coach, as a clinician, as a practitioner, we actually can't give our clients and patients too many options. You have to, that's part of being a coach, is narrowing it down of like, do you want to do this? Or do you want to do this? Or just a few options? What resonates with you? And I think for a developing psyche, that is not matured to be able to understand any of this. And we're giving them too many options. And to your point, the path of least resistance, we are programmed to run towards pleasure and run from pain at a very basic egoic primordial level. So then what happens when we if we create this path of least resistance, I think that that's a slippery slope and a dangerous one. And finally, we don't know the ramifications of long term, whether it's TRT for a man with low testosterone or women, like everybody's getting pumped up with hormones these days. And then that's part of, gender transitions as well. And we really don't know the physiological clinical endpoints of what happens with that. So I wanted to comment though of what the story that you told with that patient is so powerful. And I feel as doctors, clinicians, coaches, practitioners, I think the most therapeutic thing we can do for another human is simply hold space and hold a safe space that allows them to witness their truth. And I think that's exactly what you did for this young person who's probably scared, confused, overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's a tough skill to acquire, and it's a lot to subject yourself to if you're not ready for it. In my early days, I tried to hold space, and I just had a room, and I didn't know how to hold anything, and I'm like, holy crap! And then, I'd come home, I'm like trying to shake off all the stress from the day. I'm like, holy smokes! Like I wasn't holding it, I was taking it. Then I would run with it. Like, give me your pain. I'll put it on my on my pain backpack. I'll carry that around with me for the rest of my life. And I'm like, I can't keep doing that. But I mean, in this day and age, when you go to even functional docs, like a lot of times it's like a churn and burn is real quick and they don't really care. It's like, what can I plug you into? Or what supplement can I give you real quick? And it's like, it's not about that. Like, who is the person that you're speaking to? Right. And if you have, let's just say you have issues falling asleep, right? Is it because you randomly have a cortisol surge? Is it because you drank 6 cups of coffee before bed? Is it because your spouse is abusive? Is it because you're a business owner and you're forgetting all the stuff that you need to get the next day? You can't just give a one size fits all. And until you know the person who's in front of you, you're never going to get long lasting results. You could do some patch repair, right? Some cheap patch repair, which is what some people are looking for. But you and I, we want to figure out what's making you tick. Why did this occur the way that it did? And what can I do to help to educate you and change that course correction so you can have power back over your life?
This episode is brought to you by Microbiome Labs. I've been a raving fan of Microbiome Labs for many years now because of their cutting-edge research, novel microbiome solutions, and heartfelt culture. Many supplement companies exaggerate their product claims and have no research to back up what they say. Microbiome Labs, on the other hand, has up-leveled the entire functional medicine industry by modeling a research-first approach. Microbiome Labs has advanced the research of the human microbiome and offers many innovative tools to improve whole body health through the garden of life that is the microbiome, including the BiomeFX stool test and the total gut restoration system. While I have used virtually all of their products successfully with my private clients, some of my favorite products include the Megaspore Biotic, their flagship product that is a multiple strain endospore probiotic that promotes microbial diversity, mucosal barrier and intestinal lining integrity, short chain fatty acid production, and whole body health. I also love the Mega IgG 2000, which is pure serum bovine immunoglobulins that act as a defensive shield in the gut to bind and neutralize many pathogens and toxins, such as lipopolysaccharide, gluten proteins, mold toxins, exotoxins, microbial components, and so much more. I also love to use their Myomax, which is a specialized form of vitamin K2 that promotes mitochondrial function and energy production. It's actually clinically researched and shown to increase volume of oxygen, or VO2, which is a very powerful indicator of cardiovascular fitness. Be sure to visit the Microbiome Labs link in my show notes to learn more and get your microbiome support today. Yeah, so I mean, kind of that's a good segue with what we were talking about, off air, because although I am fully immersed into the functional medicine space and relatively well established in the space, I definitely am outspoken with like how we as a collective industry can do better, right? Because I do think there is, I think what we do as functional medicine professionals is one of the hardest jobs in the world because we're kind of expected to have magical solutions for everything that no one else has solutions for. And I do at times feel patients, clients, functional medicine consumers are putting us into a kind of an impossible position at times, right? And unfortunately, because of the kind of functional medicine business model of like, all right, you've got somebody there, I went to at least one, if not 10 conventional doctors, only, oh, your blood work's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. It's in your head. Here's a bunch of medications, da, 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 da. And so, okay, people don't want that. They're tired of it. There's a growing anti-pharma sentiment. I understand that. So then they turn to functional though, right? And it's this idea. And I think this is where education is important because I think too many people that have gotten turned on to functional medicine, they think fallaciously that it's like, oh, well, I'll go see a functional medicine doc Jacque here, and we'll dig for a few root causes. We'll find, the end all be all singular mysterious root cause. And it's nothing to do with me. I'm perfect, actually. Like I do everything right. I'm basically a perfect human. But I think it's mold. This crazy holistic savage guy, he keeps talking about mold online and the symptoms, like they encapsulate everything wrong with my life. So, Jacque, I think, mold is the root cause. So what protocol do you have for me that's going to just magically make it all go away? And it just doesn't work that way. And to your point, this is where I think you are a practitioner of integrity, because I don't know that all are. I think a lot of practitioners are very quick of like, great, I have something that'll make you feel better. Here you go. And that can be hard to break out of because especially when the patient and the client, that's kind of what they're wanting. That's kind of what they're coming for is, well, I want to run the test, figure out the root cause, and then you put me on a protocol and then all goes away. But I think there's a lot of power in what you're saying of, but before we just jump on an intervention bandwagon, let's pull the thread. Let's explore this a little bit. Why do you even think that? So I'm curious how you approach that because I know your clinic type and I have a good enough idea of how do you typically start when you have these people coming reporting, all these, symptom clusters and all these complaints. Where do you like to start with these people?
Foundationally, right? So let me see what you've had run. Show me your tests.
Mm-hmm.
I'll poke holes in them. I'm like, okay, it's not really going to be everything that you need. And you got this diagnosis. I'm not quite sure how they arrived at that diagnosis because they didn't do any diagnostic tests to arrive there. They're just kind of speculating. So what I've found that I have to do a lot of the times, because, when there's two different ways that I approach, like, so the medical realm of things, in my opinion, is a lot of fear-based, right? And if you attach a fear, even though the patient is like, I hate medicine, but they told me if I don't take this, I'm dead. Then they come to me and I'm like, well, but you're asking me to treat the symptoms that medication is causing. Like, would you be open to me finding out the root cause of why you have AFib or finding out the root cause of why you have high cholesterol? And they're like, well, I was told it was just genetic. I'm like, well, there could be some components to it, but I was like, but you've got this going on, you got this going on. So it's kind of like a de-education process from their medical doctors, from 40, 50 years of indoctrination of go to your medical doctor, get a prescription, and then de-educating the quick one-size-fits-all that is just, it's plaguing the functional space where it's just take this. Like constipation is a big thing, right? Side tangent on that. And people are like, just take magnesium. And when I think constipation, I'm like, let me see your tongue. Do you have white on your tongue? Do you have candida? Do you have any other things going on? Do you have SIBO? Do you have SIFO? What's causing that? Like magnesium can help with the symptoms, sure, but we got to figure out why. So when the patient comes to me, it's like, okay, I see where you have been. Clearly hasn't worked for you. This is what you're still dealing with. And so then I approach it foundationally. These are my foundational tests that we typically start patients on. If they have if the mold issue is like, okay, we can run a mycotox or a toxic burden on you and run some extra, what I call extracurricular tests, a little extra. But for the most part, if we don't first fix that foundation, you're still going to be like a dog chasing its tail, right? And so a lot of symptoms piggyback different disorders, and disorders piggyback different symptoms. And so if we just chase symptoms, you're never going to get to the root cause. And it's tough because from an emotional standpoint, social media is very saturating, where Gary Breckett does a great job making everybody think that they're dying because of a methylation issue. With methylation is massively important, but there's more to it as well. So it's not just a one size fits all. So the genetic piece is a big piece that I'm dealing with right now as well. People coming from Becca, they're like, hey, I've got MTR or MTHFR or something like that. What would you do for that? So I can coach them on that. I'm like, cool, but that's not why you have your parasites. So that's not why you have this. It may contribute and help to it, but we have to eliminate some of those other things, and these tests will help us to get that root cause for you. And then it's peeling back layers of an onion. As you get better, right, you start to establish trust and you start to establish hope, where a lot of patients don't have it. And so then you start learning more about the relationship dynamic. And you've probably seen this too, but not many happy relationships out there, especially in this space. And it's like, you're coming to me and we're trying to get you to fall asleep. You're like, I can't fall asleep. And 2 months later, you're feeling great. And you're like, now I feel comfortable. We've established hope. We've established trust. Now let me talk to you about my spouse. And I'm like, oh man, that's holding space for them and trying not to overstep any boundaries. And you can give references and I have like a Rolodex of people that I send people to, but a lot of what I find the root cause, yes, things could be going wrong, but if the spousal is a big issue, how could you not be sick, right? You're surrounded by that person every day, and then you're spending an intimate 7-8 hours or so with them, just energetically laying next to them. And if you despise that human being, you could take all the Ambien in the world, all the melatonin in the world, you're still going to be a miserable human being. So that's a long-winded answer, but...
No, that was perfect. And to me, that's how, a functional medicine intake kind of onboarding experience, should be. It's hard where I think back to, in the beginning of my career, okay, I'm a trainer, nutrition coach, metabolic technician. So it was actually a much more simple process. And in some ways, I don't know. In some ways, I almost feel like I was helping people more back then. And I think there's a little bit of self-limiting belief, kind of imposter, whatever. There's my own stuff that mixes into that perspective. But I remember when I was first kind of circulating through the functional medicine space and really transitioning into that world more so full time. At first, I assumed that we were all on the same page about foundations first, right? Like there's no point in doing, $5,000, $10,000 of experimental functional lab testing if we don't have the foundations in place. Like, let's really apply ourselves to healthy lifestyle habits and foundations not for 3 months or like it takes years of diligently practicing good lifestyle habits. And all the same stuff on all these podcasts I've been recording, we constantly are every guest bringing it back to the foundations, because in a lot of ways, and I heard, what's his name? Like Joe DeSena, or the Spartan race dude, whatever his name is. And he's kind of like a, old school, nose to the grindstone, just like tough SOB kind of dude. And I bet he would suck to have as a dad because he's that like, militant kind of guy. But he was talking about this on a reel I saw recently in just regards to kind of the tough love and how therapeutic that is. And he was also mentioning how, and I feel strongly about this, we overcomplicate everything. In today's world of technology and all the root causes, we overcomplicate so much of that because the question becomes, if we did practice good lifestyle habits diligently, consistently for months, if not years on end, then do you still have some of those symptoms? And unfortunately, many functional medicine clients, patients, consumers, they are very much looking for symptom treatment, symptom resolution. And they still have that kind of pharma conditioning that you're talking about. So you do have to kind of decondition and educate. And, I constantly am preaching, we have to be, tracking physiology more than chasing root causes. But to your point too, one of the things I do with my intake process, we've got, the symptomatology questionnaire and all that good stuff, medical history. But one of the questionnaires I like using is, and I actually got it from Precision Nutrition, and it's kind of this, life satisfaction survey. So you go around like more your physical, metabolic health, relationships, job and purpose, and the major areas of your life, in rating, how satisfied, fulfilled are you with that section of your life? Because I think that's extremely telling information to your point of like, sure, hey, Jacque, I can't sleep. I want you to treat my symptom of insomnia. I can't sleep. And there's a million and one reasons physiologically why you might not be sleeping. But yeah, to your point, if you hate the person you're sleeping next to, then maybe that's your root cause, right? So I think that's where the motivational interviewing process becomes so crucial to guide people to their truth.
Yeah. We have a similar piece on that too, where we talk about, relationships, both from like a physical standpoint, sexual standpoint, friendships, spiritual relationship. Like we want to rank that. And it's interesting because that's one of the top spots that I go to, because it's very difficult to get results if you don't have a supportive spouse. And so you'll go in and sometimes you'll ask the question and you'll be like, what, your rating here, out of 10 for, like how you rate your sex life with your spouse was a 3. Like what's going on there? And so sometimes we're like, and it's like, okay, like let's not do a deep dive in that right yet, right? Know your audience, work through that, but know in the back of your head at some point that may be something that needs to come up. So once you establish the trust, we may need to start talking about the spouse, and we may need to talk about some of these other things. But the other side of the coin in the functional space that drives me crazy is the biohacking. There's a time, in my opinion, there's a time and a place for biohacking, but people are trying to skip the foundation and run to the biohack. And I'm like, yeah, you can use them together to try and help to accelerate progress, but don't spend money on a $15,000 device if you didn't first fix your foundation. And so you've got like the Dave Aspreys and stuff and doing this, and now I don't know what your opinion is on the people drinking urine. I don't understand that right now. That's Asprey's trying to tell people to inject it. So there's like all of this biohacking jumps that people are trying to do. They're like, well, I don't want to do pharmaceuticals, and if you can't give me what I need, then I'm going to go do some biohacking. And I'm like, well, but when you're done with the biohacking, if you didn't fix the root cause again, you're still going to be dealing with the same issue, just a lot of money out of pocket.
Yeah.
So foundations are key, man. And it should be essential across the board for functional medicine.
It absolutely should be. This conversation's amazingly refreshing because, like, okay, cool. It's not just me. I didn't think so. And I didn't think it was just me, but, confirmed. Because I remember I didn't really finish that thought of when I was first circulating the functional medicine space. I very quickly recognized, and I still feel this way, I think good old-fashioned nutrition and fitness could fix like at least 80% of the problems in 80% of people 80% of the time easily, right? And then sure, you will have that 20%. A lot of my audience has heard, probably knows my super sad story, and I don't need to get into it and kind of what got me into functional medicine. But there are, let's say, the canaries in the coal mine, which I know what that means. I know a lot of my audience knows what that means. And, these are not the individuals that have a lot of psycho-emotional stuff to work through that want to identify as a canary in the coal mine. I'm talking about somebody that is actually a canary in the coal mine. They're somebody that they do the foundations. They have at times impeccable nutrition, impeccable fitness, impeccable lifestyle. They are living they're in the 99 percentile of Americans. And yet they might have debilitating, mysterious illness that nobody can, that type of thing. That's how I really got into functional medicine. But then this space is very saturated with, really a lot of people that need to do a lot of health coaching and foundational work. And I do like the holistic health coach sort of ideology of like, well, to be fair, it's not just nutrition, fitness, although I would argue those are the two biggest, right? Like what you are fueling your body with and how you're moving it and pushing it. I think fitness and nutrition, it's like the closest thing to a cure-all. But sure, let's factor in sunlight and nature and stress management, sleep hygiene and relationships, and, just rounding out that holistic milieu. But unfortunately, the symptom treatment, the instant gratification, and some of the biohacking, I will, I had my good friends, the biohacker babes, on the podcast recently, and I have I have a similar attitude towards biohacking as you do. And what I really appreciated about having them on was I really gave them the opportunity of like, okay, you two tell me, what should biohacking be? Because it can, from your perspective, my perspective, a lot of it kind of looks like confused consumerism and instant gratification chasing. But what should it be? And of course, they really embody what it should be, of lifestyle foundations and all of that. And if you want to play with some gadgets, now if you want to inject your own urine back into your body, I don't know that I can help you. Like, go give Dave Asper your money. I blocked that guy on Instagram. I wasn't going to say it, but I'll just, it's my podcast, because he was trolling me out of arrogance. And I'm like, block, like, but I digress. Back to your point, though, with those foundations, I'm curious how you operate. Of like, do you have a team of coaches? Do you do the coaching? Like, how are you facilitating the foundational work? Because that to me is like the hardest part. Reading labs and recommending protocols, like that's the easy part, but the foundational work is actually really difficult.
Yeah. So I'm doing it all right now. So we
Wow.
have yeah. So we have hopes of getting, I think we have 2 people lined up to try to start to help me with the patient load and bring a little bit more to the table. Mainly because it's an upward battle, and you would think, like, if somebody comes to you and they're overweight, for example, like most people would assume, oh, they're overeating. And I get these people, and I'm like, how's your macros? How are you eating? How are you fueling? How are you moving? And they're like, oh, I get so much protein in a day. I'm like, talk to me about your day. And they're like, oh, I'll have 1 egg in the morning. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like, it's 6 grams of protein. Go ahead. And we'll hit like 50 grams of protein for the total day. I'm like, what?
Oh my.
And then we track their calories, and they're like, I'm exhausted all the time. I can't lose weight. I'm eating, and I calculate out, it's like 600 calories. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, how did you get here? And they're like, well, I'm not really that hungry. And so my mind goes, well, what's going on from a GI standpoint? Usually I find like Helicobacter pylori or H. pylori is a big issue. It suppresses the ghrelin response, so it doesn't stimulate appetite. Or if you eat and you bloat, well, your body is like, well, I don't want to be bloated, so don't eat. So foundationally, it's like getting people to eat more and breaking that psychological barrier of, if I eat more, then I'm going to gain more weight. I'm like, no, calories from food are measurements of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Get more food, good quality food in, mind you, but get that in and start moving your body. And a lot of people can't sleep at night because they don't move enough during the day. So they're not burning any energy. So they go to bed and their body's like, I still have a ton of energy left to burn. So they're just like tossing and turning in bed, like, I can't sleep. So you would think, again, from a foundational standpoint, that people would be coming to you better educated on it, but it sounds like it's the opposite. So hopefully I'm going to be getting a couple people underneath me to do it, so it'll open me up a little bit more.
Well, if you ever need, like I've got a practitioner group and tons of people always looking for extra work, so I can always hook you up. I've got so many. I'm very, I feel very fortunate in all sincerity that I'm connected to just so many amazing practitioners and coaches that they get it. They really get it. And, you can appreciate this. So I always like to joke that I have a PhD in bro science, right? I don't have a college degree, so how I ended up where I am, I'm still not sure. And I jokingly say that, and that's self-deprivational, because it's like, well, I know exactly how I got here, actually. But what's kind of fun for me, you'll appreciate this, I feel like bro science has really made a comeback. Because like back when I was like 17, 18, 19, 20, and, like bro science with Don Mazzetti,
Yeah.
like it was such a thing, and it was such a movement back in the good old days of like Muscle Magazine and Dana Lynn Bailey, YouTube videos. everybody snorting pre-workout and creatine, and it was great. And I had my big bro bodybuilding, bro phase, bro science. And the point that I'm getting at is I'm really starting to see bro science concepts that are really now becoming like functional medicine staples and foundations. Like, even for example, I've been working with this company called Berkeley Life that does nitric oxide,
So
and they're an HCP, clinical grade nutraceutical brand. They invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into legitimate clinical research, and that's some of the stuff I help them with. But my point being, like, nitric oxide, right? Nitric oxide, that's bro science 101. Every good gym lad, would tell you, like, yeah, you're going to take a nitric oxide supplement, 60 minutes before you work out to increase the pump and increase blood flow and vasodilation, train harder, train longer, recover faster. Here we are 15 effing years later, and now functional medicine's like, oh, nitric oxide like might have therapeutic impact in a bunch of chronic disease. And it's like, yeah, no shit, man. So
yeah,
I love seeing, or I'll give a shout out. She'll be on the podcast soon. Do you know Dr. Tina Moore?
I don't know. I don't think I do.
You'd love her. She's a naturopathic physician and chiropractor, actually.
Okay.
Good friend of mine, total savage. She's way more of a savage than I am. And but she's very much dedicated her page and brand to, metabolic health, and she's kind of constantly talking about the importance of strength training. And I think what's exciting for me is I look at dudes like you that are, jacked, you take care of yourself, you walk the walk, you talk the talk. And I think that's the example that we need, right? I've never understood, and this isn't to disparage anyone, but I remember it was actually like my Navy SEAL instructor dude. So this is the dude that, once upon a time when I was going for the Navy SEAL program, his job was to facilitate the physical screening test for all the Navy SEAL recruits within a given region. In order to maintain your Navy SEAL contract, you have to do your PST every month to show that you're in shape and staying in shape. And his job is to mentor you and get you ready for SEAL training. And, this is when I was 18 years old. And I remember him saying it then, like, Brendan, why would you take, fitness advice from somebody that is not fit? You know what I mean? Like, he was saying he never understood that. He was kind of passing along to me. And it's like, yeah, why would you take health advice from somebody that doesn't embody health? Why would you take fitness advice from somebody that doesn't embody fitness? Why would you take relational advice from somebody that doesn't have a relationship like you want, right? So I think there's a lot of things that just being a role model that can hold space and be able to coach people through these foundational concepts.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way, and I was mentally urging you to just say it because I feel the same exact way. Like, there's a ton of people in this space where they'll make excuses for themselves as to why they can't look a certain way. In terms of like a functional medicine practitioner, a naturopath, chiropractors, or even you have like obese chiropractors. I'm like, how do you move? Like, how do you adjust? Like, that doesn't make sense. But like, if you're like, you know what, I don't like the way that I look, I don't like the way that I feel, I don't like this, but you go to somebody that has the same exact problems as you, it's like, why? You're just going to perpetuate that victim mentality because you're not going to get answers because that person doesn't know. And then from a doctoral standpoint, I love working with my patients because it pushes me to also be, to have integrity of like, hey, like, I just killed myself in Spain for I just killed myself in Spain for 10 days in a row, doing 3 days of which I didn't think I was capable of. So like, when people make excuses, they're like, well, I can't. Like, you can, you just have to push past that level of discomfort, trust yourself, and get there. You're safe, do it right, do it appropriately, but model it after somebody that you want to be. And relationship coaches are a big thing right now. And I'm like, you've had how many divorces? Like, that's not a very good track record. You got 5 of them under your belt. Like, to me, I don't want to model the behavior of what could end me up with 5 divorces. I'm happy with my marriage. I don't want to go anywhere. So like, I don't want to model that. So I think having a selection in the space is big. I do think that more men need to show up as men, as practitioners as well. There's a lot of little people, like little little docs that are very skinny, very emaciated, looking like Dave Asprey, where he looks like he just finished, 10 months of chemotherapy. And I don't think that that's a healthy looking human being. So be selective and don't feel bad for going. Right? I'm sorry. I'm going to say it, and it doesn't bother me. Like it's true. He doesn't look very healthy, and a lot of these people that are out there don't look healthy, but they're trying to pitch something to you. So use your brain, use your gut, use your instincts, check in with yourself and see if it fits right and feels right to you. And don't be afraid to fire your doc and find somebody that does fit right for you. Right? I think that's also really important.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot to be said for finding the right fit for you energetically, whether we're talking about like a therapist or a coach or a doctor. Man, it tempted me so much to talk some. Yeah, I'll just I'll practice some self-regulation real quick. So I'm curious, because I agree. Something that we're kind of circling around and sort of flirting with conceptually and ideologically. And you said something earlier when we were talking about like the Ben Pakulski camp and 3 days and all this stuff. Some of the intent football and some of the intense stuff. There is a demographic. You fit in that demographic. I fit in that demographic. I think of some of my other friends that we would all be quite the bro squad. There are some of us that have experienced, overtraining. I know for me, I mean, speaking of like my Navy SEAL aspiration days, my God, I think about the volume of intensity that I used to be able to do and used to do. And of course, with, like, okay, when I was in high school and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be Navy SEAL, that's my life goal. And so I knew that was opting into, first off, the hardest military training in existence and like the shittiest life of just like crushing your body, breaking it, breaking your mind. And yet, talk about mental toughness, mental fortitude, mental resilience through the fire of pushing your body and your mind to the absolute limits. And then you keep going and going and going. Now, I can say, to speed up my point a little bit, I can attest to how deleterious and damaging physiologically and mentally too much of that can be. And for me, it was after the Navy SEAL aspiration was kind of taken away from me because of a injury and a medical discharge. I found myself in a very deep, dark depression. And it was during that time that I was having this existential crisis and, had my intentional overdose. And, that kind of put me on the path. However, I don't regret fucking any of it. I don't regret a single workout. I don't regret the self-punishment because it made me strong mentally and physically. And to your point, and this isn't, two bros saying that everybody just needs to be a tough bro, but I see a lot of physical and mental softness and weakness in the population. And I know that doesn't earn me popularity points to say, but there's some truth to it, and I think the people that have earned their own respect and they've put in the work, they've made themselves suffer, at times like unimaginable degrees of self-induced suffering because you're trying to find yourself in your own darkness. Like how deep can you dig? Now, I think the maturation curve, which is what you alluded to, how long do you have to prescribe that self-induced suffering before you've earned, your own respect? And then you allow yourself to not always push and push. And I think that's the maturation curve. I think, I'm really talking about myself right now. A young, self-destructive man that feels like he has a lot to prove, he's going to keep punishing himself into death and destruction and oblivion. The matured, evolve, strong, integral man is going to recognize, I've pushed myself to the breaking point and beyond. I know my limits, and now I'm going to take care of myself because I honor myself. I don't need to overtrain. And to your point, maybe something about minimum effective dose, but knowing that you can go there, knowing that you can go to that animalistic, primal, dark, scary place and kick some ass. That's the kind of battle buddy I want on my team for the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly, man. And there's two things came to mind. Bro responsibly,
Hmm.
right? And then the other one was the hangover. Is it Mr. Kim or whatever? It's like, but did you die?
Yeah.
No, you didn't, right?
Yeah.
You may have thought that you were going to, but I think from a measurable standpoint, right? If you do that once or twice a year, right, where you just go into destructive mode, like what am I physically capable of? I know what I did earlier in the year. Now just let's freaking do it again and see if I improved, right? And so make it like you know how we used to do like 1 rep maxes. I didn't really like that too much because I got injured because I lifted like an idiot. But 1 rep max used to be like the measure of like, you know, I've been working my ass off. Did I in fact increase my 1 rep max? If not, it's like, well, crap. We go back to the drawing board, figure out why. Same thing with these other tests. You push yourself for 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, and see what you are physically capable of. And then the level of confidence that you bring back is like, it's payment in and of itself, right? Where like most of the days, if stress hits you, it's not as bad as what you just did for 10 days. You're going to be fine. You're not dead. You're going to make it. So I think pushing yourself to limits is very crucial as a man, and women too, right? So push yourself to your limit. Don't be afraid to go there. But then knowing in the back of your head, hey, at any moment, again, if somebody was going to attack me in my home or if something happened on the streets, I have it within myself that I don't have to fear any other man because they don't know what I'm physically capable of. And zombie apocalypse wise, that just give me a call. We'll take over the whole freaking world. But I do think that this is something that men need to start doing, and men need to start challenging themselves. Find these authentic connections. That's the other piece too, is find good freaking people out there. And in the world of men, most men suck. They're weak, or they're timid, or you know, those are just characteristics, but like their actions also align with like, I'm not much of a drinker. I don't really like to drink. So I'm not going to go to the bar until 3 o'clock in the morning and get hammered. That's not my thing, right? So I want to find people who are going to train over Christmas break, or they're going to be pushing themselves. Or if I'm like, hey, I'm going to do something crazy, you want to do it with me? You're like, yeah, let's do it. I'm not prepared for it, but let's go, right? So establishing that authentic connection, knowing that there's more people out there and that you're safe in feeling what you feel that masculinity, I think is 3 things that would be really important for most men to be able to feel.
I think you're spot on, and the fitness metaphor, and with my background in fitness, and you know, I've been an athlete my whole life, and it just always, from you know, as a kid, karate and martial arts and combat sports was just my first love, my first passion. I'm still, you know, lifelong, right? Like, you know, once black belt, always black belt kind of thing. But just I think so much healing from pushing yourself physically, so much mental resilience from pushing yourself physically. And I mean, fuck, like, for God's sakes, how many of the great, like, Stoic quotes, or Hippocrates, the father of medicine, all the great quotes of, like, what a shame it is for a man to grow old without ever seeing what his body's capable of. You know, man, woman, doesn't matter, you know, it does, but still, the point being, this amazing plastic, adaptable, specific adaptation to impose to man meat suit that we're blessed with, of like, this thing is so capable. And I think a lot of times, I'm sure you see it in your practice, so much self-limiting belief in people. You know, I'm constantly, I like to sprinkle in a little philosophy into my, you know, Instagram content, just try to get the people thinking, and then the algorithms, like, people don't want to think and it doesn't perform. And I'm like, that's too bad. That's too bad. But, you know, our self-limiting beliefs, your root cause, right? Like, really digging into that kind of stuff. And I want to be sensitive to the audience and anybody that might be listening, so they don't think like, oh God, these guys are radiating toxic masculinity. Because like, you and me both, there's obviously, we're going to get fired up as we're talking to each other and pounding our chests philosophically. And yet, at the same time, I also know, based on the story you told and based on the encounters I have every day in my practice, I guarantee you that you and I are both very gentle and warm, but also strong with holding space for people in that bedside manner. Because I know you and I both work with, a lot of mold illness and, complex chronic illness and autoimmunity and trauma and people that are, sick and hopeless. And I can be sensitive. I'm kind of checking myself a little bit here. We can be very sensitive to, I'm thinking about the people because you know where I'm going with this. The people that have like, but I can't work out hard because I have MCAS or I have exercise intolerance and da 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 da. Now, there's kind of two camps with that because as a practitioner, it can be scary and uncomfortable when like, okay, we're recommending dietary modification, we're recommending fitness as an intervention, as medicine, and we're getting that pushback and that resistance of, well, no, like I can't do that. You don't get it. You're a fit, strong, privileged man. You don't get it. And it's like, I get it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, because I know how I handle it. How would you handle, somebody that does have legitimate debilitating, fibromyalgia, depression, chronic debilitating fatigue? Anytime, I get dizzy when I stand up and I have POTS and exercise intolerance. How do you approach that then of how do we start what it could be a long process of building up that capacity, building up that vital reserve, building up that resilience? Because I don't think immobility is the solution. I don't think succumbing to I can't. I don't think that's the solution. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, I agree. So it's a self-limiting belief, and I felt the same way. Like when I used to train, when I had mold toxicity, I used to explain to my wife, it felt like the muscle was like snapping off the bone. Like I couldn't recover. It just hurt really, really bad. But again, like the solution not necessarily being like, hey, I can't train. It's like how can I train?
Yeah.
Right. So, growing up, like we all have our stories and stuff. Like I had a ton of limiting beliefs. My dad used to call me a weakling, tiny, like all that stuff. And I chose to perceive it as like, well, if he perceives me that way, I'm going to show him. So it motivated me to be better. And through different illnesses and stuff too, you develop a tolerance for your own bullshit. And I don't think enough people have a high enough level of tolerance. They're too afraid. Okay. And that's a really serious thing. Like if you have these reactions or exercise intolerance and you can't figure out a way to do it, start somewhere, start simple, right? You can walk to the refrigerator to get food, right? So that you can go outside, get some vitamin D and go for a walk, right? And so then just start small goals. So let's start with walk outside. Instead of giving distance, I found distance, when you tell people do miles, they freak out. But if you're like, hey, just go outside and go for like a 10-minute walk, right? Report back to me, tell me how you felt. Oh, I could do that. Perfect. Try 20 tomorrow. Okay. And so you slowly start building it back up. And from what I found is like people in those situations, their confidence is completely freaking shattered. They haven't been held properly. They have a lot of fear. And with mold, a lot of people tend to become hermits. They just become recluse. They hide indoors. And it's like if you're in the moldy environment, you're making things worse. So get out, get fresh oxygen. Because the other thing with mold causes hypoxia, so decrease in oxygen intake, right? So then you're going to be more toxic. So if you go outside and you breathe good quality air, or as good of air as we can get, I won't go off on that, but we can breathe other air, that can help with oxygen saturation. So we can bring up the amount of oxygen we're taking in. So I've always found starting small, starting like little increments, get better, get better, get better. You build the confidence, like now try doing this, right? I like telling people about a shower routine. Right. And these are people who either I can't go to the gym, I can't afford to go to the gym, or I don't have time to go to the gym. Like you take a shower each day? Like, yeah. I'm like, do 20 push-ups while the shower's warming up. Can you do that? No, that's easy. Perfect. So then you go, what I do is I'll like say, you do 20 push-ups on Monday, 20 air squats on Tuesday, and you can do crunches or some ab work on Wednesday and then repeat. So you get 6 days a week, you're moving your body. Getting a little bit stronger every day. But the big thing is building the confidence back up. And once you get over like this threshold, then the patients I find tend to start asking you, hey, I saw you doing this. Could I do that? Like, yeah, let's structure something out there. Let's start to challenge your body a little bit more. And in that time, with our protocols and procedures, they're going to be feeling better. They're going to be far less catabolic, right? Because if people with those types of issues were going and doing what I did in Spain, they would probably be permanently handicapped. Like it's very, very hard. But if your body is so darn catabolic, I don't try to increase the catabolic stress too much until I switch on the anabolic activity so you can start to recover. A lot of that is movement, but a lot of it is nutrition too. So start eating more food, get more calories in, your body won't be in a deficit. And then once you start doing that, you start gaining more momentum and you start noticing that you're a lot more free than you otherwise told yourself.
Okay, this is amazing, because something I'm trying to be good about on this new and improved Holistic Savage podcast is making sure that I'm delivering the audience actionable, tangible wisdom that hopefully they can successfully integrate into their day-to-day lives. And so just again, because the majority of the people I work with are the complex chronic illness, or at least they identify as that. And that's kind of a whole thing in itself that we can have an episode too about. But I think to your point, it's the baby steps, right? Personal training school 101 is specific adaptation to imposed demand. If you put more mechanical tension and time under tension on your biceps, guess what? Your biceps get bigger and stronger. Their neuromuscular connections get more efficient. But every single aspect of your health, your psyche, it all operates on that specific adaptation to impose demand. And that same rhetoric can be very much applied to trauma or traumatic conditioning per se. Like, let's say you have a father figure that's like, you're weak, you're small, and it creates this father wound. But then of course there is still an intrinsic choice in that, a victim or victor. Which do you want to be, right? And so I like how you answered that comment, because I think of somebody that, let's say they actually do truly have mast cell activation and mitochondrial dysfunction and mold illness and lots of inflammation. And we have the correct labs to objectively qualify and prove that, not just some of the pseudo bullshit in our industry of like, I pushed on your arm and I think that you might have this pseudo diagnosis.
Virtually.
Yeah.
I virtually pushed on your arm.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so intuitive. You wouldn't get it because you're not energetically open enough, Jacque, but I'm so intuitive that I can sense from 1,000 miles away that you tested weak while you held that plastic vial of water. Therefore, you have chronic Lyme disease. God, I sometimes hate.
I'm laughing so hard just because I do that so much. Oh my God, especially in Phoenix, man. There's a lot of those practitioners like, what kind of training are you doing?
I don't get it. Have you ever asked
muscle testing? Like, what?
Have you ever asked ChatGPT what ChatGPT thinks about like bioresonance or applied kinesiology?
I haven't.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, if ChatGPT says it's bullshit, I don't know. Well, I just lost a few followers, but I'll survive. But I really do the coaching psychology piece, to your point. It's helpful I like to explain this stuff to clients because I think it's very empowering, where it's like, no, if you understand the way your neurolimbic system works, where your brain is wired through evolution to continue behaving in a way that gets you closer to what your body, your genetics, your epigenetics, that have no other desire but to continue. That's what genetics want. They want to proliferate and contribute and proliferate on a genetic level and reproduce and whatever. Continue the genetic lineage. And so our brain is wired to do behaviors that get us closer to that sort of, endpoint, if you will. And so, for example, if I'm a track coach and I got a track athlete and they're a high jumper, if I set that bar a little bit too high, like 1 inch too high, my athlete, they're trying so hard. They keep knocking it over. Now they're getting in their head. They're getting frustrated. They feel like a loser. They can't get over the bar. But if I recognize this, if I set the bar a little bit low, still they have to apply themselves. They have to really get a good jump. It's not easy, but it's doable. And then, oh man, coach, I cleared that. Like you build up their confidence that way, right? So I think a lot of times as coaches, practitioners, doctors, there's a lot of that of setting realistic goals that they can achieve that gives that neurolimbic system the input signal that says, I'm a winner. I can do this. Build up that confidence. What really got me into lab testing in the beginning of my career was all of my clients were weight loss clients, all of them, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 150, whatever, they were all weight loss clients. So when you're, motivational interviewing a weight loss client, why are you here? Why are you signing up for a gym membership? Why do you want to work with me as a personal trainer? Well, I want to lose weight. Well, why do you want to lose weight? Like, let's peel the onion a little bit. And then more importantly, how are we going to measure progress along your journey? How are we going to definitively, objectively know that we're making progress? What are they going to say? Well, my weight goes down. Now, I know that weight is a horrible metric. It's not sensitive. It's not specific. We should at least be using, body fat percentage. Enter, VO2 testing, enter RMR testing, enter blood work, right? I bet your blood work is going to change and shift before we see any shifts on the scale, right? So the long-winded point, I think realistic goals, even if it's baby steps, I think having sensitive, accurate, reproducible, objective data that is relevant to the specific goal. Like if you're a mast cell activation person, you should be tracking like your tryptase and your histamine levels because that is sensitive and specific to your specific health ailment. Or if you're, overweight, like let's track your insulin and your leptin levels. So that way, regardless of how you subjectively feel or are perceiving the changes and flux of your symptoms and physiology, we can see definitively what we're doing is working. So why don't we hold the course, right? But as you can see, it's a lot of psychology and where do we set that bar as the practitioner on the coach while holding a lot of safe space and compassion and empathy and having some degree of objectivity to prove to them that they're on the right track. And unfortunately, I think it's really hard for us functional medicine people to get the patient or the client to give us the opportunity to serve them in that way. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I tell a lot of my patients too, weight loss isn't the issue. Weight loss is a symptom of an issue.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I want to solve the weight loss issue, I got to find out why. And there's like you said about sleep, there's a million different things that could be happening whenever it comes to weight. It could be insulin, it could be leptin, it could be an infection, it could be carb consumption, it could be poor sleep, it could be lack of water, lack of nutrition. There are so many things that stack into it. But when you get the idea of like, here's where we are, okay, I understand, right? Like I understand where your goal is. My goal is to bring health to you, to make you healthy. And a side effect, I always joke and say, a side effect of becoming healthy is hitting that goal. That weight can come off. But I can't get that weight to come off and stay off if I don't first fix the foundation yet again. And something, when you were talking about the small and the tangible and the challenges, I thought back to Spain again, not to keep plugging the muscle camp, but we had people of every walk of life. We had a guy, his name's Thompson. He's a little dude, and he knows he's a teeny tiny guy, and he was yoga all day, every day. Maybe like 100, he measured things in kilos, so I'm not great with kilos, but probably like 120, 130 pounds wet, like just never really trained in his life. And day one, mentally, he was like, holy crap, these guys, he called us a bunch of tanks. He's like, there's a bunch of tanks here. Like, how am I going to do this? But he kept fucking fighting. He had his blood sugar dropped. He went hypoglycemic for a second. So he like took a minute, got some water, got some food in, and just relaxed. And instead of giving up on himself, we were doing tire flips. He comes right over and he goes, I want to do some tire flips. I'm like, hell yeah, buddy. Like, get in here, get some. First off, you're going to give me more of a rest because we were doing circuits. But I'm like, get some. Yeah, let's do it. So you could see the mental as well as physical progression. I think he gained 3 kilos, which is what, 6 pounds or so of muscle in a week from training and eating the way that we did. And then there was a guy with limiting beliefs as well. His name's Matt. super great human, had a whole bunch of issues, had DVTs, had cardiovascular issues, usually wears compression socks. Everyone had bad shoulders, bad this, bad that. But then like day one, he's like, I'm really not trying to push myself too much. I'm just kind of, he was like a sideline participant. And then as the days in the week went on, he started getting aggressive. He started getting after it. We did a 3-hour hike up a mountain in Spain, and he was doing it. It was hard for him, but now his level of acceptance towards himself, he's like, man, really, I am capable of a lot more. So I think if we could do a great job as practitioners of exposing limiting beliefs, not in an aggressive way, like this is what's wrong with you, but like, hey, do you ever think maybe the reason that this is going on is because you keep telling yourself the same darn story. And so your body always wants you to be right. So it just keeps reinforcing that same behavior time and time again. You're in this like neural feedback loop and you can't get out of it. So if we traumatize you in a good way, right? Traumatize you with an experience that we know you can safely get through, then your body's going to be like, wait a second, I don't know if I believe this story anymore. But it's that beautiful synapse, if you will, between the two of like, how do we get from here to here in a safe, constructive way? And I think it takes somebody like yourself or myself or somebody that you work with it that can help to bridge that gap for people to know that they're capable of way more than they're currently telling themselves.
Well, thoughts become proteins, right? I think we have to your point, and it can be hard. It can be hard as a coach, practitioner, doctor. It can be because we don't want to be the bad guy. But here's the problem I'm seeing a lot on like social media these days. It's a lot of like, we're all trying to get likes. We're all trying to, grow our platforms, whatever. So it's like, well, telling people what they want to hear, but that's not what a person of integrity should do. You speak truth, right? Like if you don't coddle, like you're not helping somebody heal by coddling them or reinforcing their self-limiting beliefs. But to your point, we don't need to shove the mirror of self-reflection to shove their shit in their face either, right? Which is why motivational interviewing is such a powerful skill set of just asking open-ended questions to really get them thinking. And something earlier that came up when you were talking about the catabolic, and you don't want to stress an excessively catabolic system, that I thought that was really profound. I might need to meditate on it, but I kind of want to postulate that healing in a lot of ways is an anabolic process. I'm just kind of putting that out there, see how it feels, see how it lands. Of like, I think I'll think on it more, but I feel like the healing process is very anabolic. Now, there's some nuance there of like maybe some of the like, for example, the bad tissue, the unhealthy, dysfunctional tissue, or like mitophagy, the shitty mitochondria will like gobble themselves up. But then mitogenesis of like, we will birth and form new, stronger, more robust. But there is this catabolic of break down the waste, break down the dead, break down the dysfunctional tissue and foliage, and anabolize and grow the new healthy tissue through. But this kind of to your point of, I used to teach all my weight loss clients this of kind of teaching them the idea of like, well, fat loss in a lot of ways is going to be a side effect of muscle gain. And you said something that was similar to that effect. And I think really health, though, you have to build your health. You have to grow. It's a very anabolic, and also the mental, think about how many neural networks you're going to build and grow, as you're building this new belief system of, yes, I fucking can climb this mountain, or whatever the case is. So I know, just for the sake of time, I'm just going on, and we'll have to do a part 2. But as we start wrapping up, I would love to hear from you. What are some of the things, the lifestyle habits, like some of your non-negotiable that Jacque needs in order to stay fit, to stay homeostatic, grounded, healthy, happy? I'd be very curious, like what your foundational routine really looks like. And if you want to sprinkle in any like supplements or therapeutics that you like too, whatever goes.
Yeah, so I think one of my main priorities is sleep. So not just napping during the day, but like good quality sleep, deep level sleep. Making sure my bedtime routine is pretty similar, if not identical, every single night. Wind down routine, go to bed, stay asleep, wake up at the proper time. The nutrition side of things, I have non-negotiables with ultimately what I put in my body. Sometimes I'll do some fasting, or what I call like entrepreneurial fasting, where I'll get my 4 hours in, then I'll do my lunchtime meal. But one of my biggest non-negotiables from a mental health standpoint is if I don't go to the gym, if I don't move my body in a given day, that by itself can ruin my day. And I think that maybe people need to know that more. Like if you're dealing with emotional stuff, or if you're absorbing stuff and you don't have an outlet to express it, to move it, to go into that state, especially as a man, I think we just continue to just crumble every day, and we have a lack of purpose. I also love working. I love tests. I love everything that I do. Little hacks that I do, I get adjusted once a week. I have chiropractic appointments with my buddy down the road. I have a guy that lives right down the street as well. We'll adjust each other too. Supplements and stuff. I don't think I really have any like magic bullets or magic pills. It's just, eat what you're supposed to eat. If you need a multivitamin, take one. Creatine is good, 5 grams of creatine. Other than that, yeah, I live a pretty normal, to me, normal life, not anything extravagantly sexy. It's just kind of do the foundation again. Just have that every day and let that be your non-negotiables.
I love it. I love it. I think it's important for people to hear that, and hopefully, I definitely tried to steer us in a way of like what we're practicing and preaching, because I would really hate it if some people listen to this episode and it's like, these buff white guys, like how annoying, they don't get it. And because, the funny thing, I've had this experience a lot professionally and stuff. I generally feel pretty misunderstood, to be honest. And I'm a pretty private person. And it's like, I know what I look like, and I can feel people like really wanting to project like, this guy's like one of those prototypical, like, white douchebags with muscles or whatever. But then it's like they get to know me and they're like, oh, like there's a little bit more, going on in there. And I think, guys like you and like, I feel like we're kind of cut from the same cloth. And so I think it's really refreshing to hear like what you just mapped out. These are all very simple, foundational, nothing extreme, nothing out of the ordinary. There, like I didn't hear any, oh yeah, this $10,000, biohacking gadget, or, it's definitely, the probiotics that I'm taking. Don't get me wrong, I love supplements, I love nutraceuticals and all the things, but the foundations, and it's really nothing crazy. And my God, it just makes you feel so much better. Nature walks is a big one for me. Sleep, the exercise, the work. I really like the concept of ikigai, that Japanese philosophy, and it's a ancient philosophy that's essentially like your reason for being, and it's kind of finding the sweet spot that is the ikigai, that is kind of that perfect combination of, what the world needs, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, what you can get paid for. There's a sweet spot in there, and it can be kind of hard to get into that sweet spot, but even the pursuit of ikigai is a very, fulfilling way to go. But all that to say, how can people follow you, learn more about you, learn about your work? You have a podcast too that I was on not that long ago.
Yeah, so I wanted to piggyback off of what you said here as
Yeah,
well.
please do.
So this is actually something that was really interesting. So I love adjusting, and I tell my wife, like, I would do everything for free if I could, but I have to live, so I
Right.
can't.
Yeah.
So we were in Spain, and one of the videographers that was there, it was like a 75-degree day, and he's like in a blue hoodie, and he just looks like he's dead. And I'm like, what's going on with you, brother? And he's like, I'm just very cold. I'm like, it's hot. Like, how are you filming us? You're carrying like a 50-pound camera. How are you doing this? And I'm like, man, something's off with him. So we're downstairs getting ready for our conditioning training. And Phoebe comes down and is like, hey, Artem's not doing too great. And he was going to go to the pharmacy, but Ben said, talk to you first. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'll go up and talk to him. And I'm like, what's going on? And so he had shrimp pizza or prawn pizza the night before. I'm like, that sounds disgusting. But he woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and was just like painfully ill. And he had food poisoning, he had a headache, he had everything that was going on. So I lay him down on the gym mat, I adjust him real quick. And then I was like, when we go back to the hotel, I've got herbs and stuff that I just travel with. And I was like, I'll give you a couple of each. I'll tell you how to take it and you should be good. So went back, his buddy came, grabbed him because he was still kind of like, kind of comatose. Woke up in the morning, he sprinted over to me and he gave me a giant hug. And he was like, your magic pill box saved, like everything just saved me, right? So it's like, don't necessarily perceive us for giant white meatheads. Like we truly care. If we were in this profession, it's not even necessarily a choice for us. Like we were called to this profession for a reason. All of the things that we have gone through, whether we swap horror stories or trauma that we've experienced, like that shouldn't matter. Trust the people who are in front of you, because you'd be surprised. The people that look like us, we could be assholes, but give us a chance to show you otherwise. Don't judge a book by its cover, and we wouldn't do the same to you as well. So, I think there's more hope and stuff for people out there if we would just stop perceiving things as we're told to perceive things.
Right.
And again, being in Spain, like those videographers are from Ukraine, so I could have a whole thing in my head of what Ukrainians are like. And then there's people from all of these different countries that came to this event, and all of us got together, no matter what our color was or race or religion, didn't matter. We were just a bunch of guys that were together looking to improve themselves. So that was a little tangent, but
no, I'm glad you said it. I'm a very energetic creature. I got way more excited on this, getting to bro out with a fellow man of integrity that embodies a lot of the same core values that are fucking sacred to me. And so I think that's a really powerful message to, kind of wrap up things with, because even just as cliche as it might sound, kindness is medicine. Giving people a lot of compassion and patience and benefit of the doubt, all humans are highly emotional creatures, not always logical. It takes a lot of empathy and compassion, and it's always a reciprocal thing, right? Something I'm very committed to is always, giving people that compassion and empathy and not projecting any bullshit narratives that people try, and that should be reciprocated. And I think there's an accountability piece too, right? Where I think if we want to see our society heal and the collective heal, that's really the first step. A lot of love, a lot of compassion. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful note to wrap up on. But man, seriously, this was such a pleasure. We'll definitely have you back on as a repeat guest, because I wasn't entirely sure where the conversation would go, but I just feel like there was so much value, and I'm deeply grateful to honestly have randomly crossed paths at a gym in Peoria.
Yeah, man. I don't think anything happens by accident. I think everything happens for a specific reason, and you just so happen to be wearing the tank. I think you're wearing that tank top, actually, the Holistic Savage tank top. And I'm like,
I got like 10 of these.
I'm like awkwardly staring at him. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, hold it, that's speaking my language. I'm like, should I go out? I'm like, fuck it, let's do it. Yeah, man. So I'm grateful for obviously the opportunity to be able to get to meet you, and we've chatted and stuff too. It's not just like these little one-offs where it's like, hey, come on my podcast, or I'll come on your podcast. Like we keep this connection open because again, you're part of my tribe, and I trust you with things, and a man of integrity. And I know that if I come to you with something and you come to me with something, we're happy to share ideas back and forth, because we just want to make the world a better place. So thank you for the opportunity again, man, being able to do another episode with you. It's so fluid. Like as soon as we start speaking, it doesn't have to have a topic. We just go after it. But again, thank you for the opportunity, man.
Oh, absolutely, brother. I feel the same way. And as soon as the zombie apocalypse starts, I'll be, at your doorstep with all my guns.
Works, man. I got a place off grid. No one's coming to it. So
cool, man.
We're safe. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you on, brother. I'll be sure to include your Instagram handle and links and everything in the show notes. So for all of the audience and listeners, be sure to give Doc Jacque a follow for all of his buffness and wisdom and amazing hair. And information about mold and functional medicine, but we'll definitely have him back on, and appreciate y'all tuning in. Thanks for listening to the Holistic Savage podcast. This is a Wellness Out Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and edited and mixed by Mike Fry. As always, if you liked this episode, please rate it and review it on your podcast app. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. See you next time. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.